You're assembling a sacred library, the most important collection your community will ever possess. Every book should reinforce core beliefs, yet the ancient Israelites included a book that says God's justice makes no sense, and another that never mentions God at all. They did this deliberately. The third section of the Hebrew Bible, the Ketuvim, contains some of the most unsettling and rebellious voices in Scripture. Understanding why requires a different way of reading. Ketuvim is Hebrew for writings. It's the third and final section of the Hebrew Bible, following the Torah, the 5 books of law and instruction, and the Neviim, the prophets. The Ketuvim contains a remarkable range of texts: Psalms, Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Lamentations, Esther, Daniel, and Chronicles, among others. Here's what matters. While many of these books contain much older material, individual psalms may date back centuries, scholars broadly agree they reached their final written form in the post-exilic period, meaning after the Babylonian exile, roughly 539 BCE onward. That timing is not coincidental, it's the key to everything that follows. For most of modern scholarship, the dominant approach was the historical critical method. Scholars worked to reconstruct what texts originally said, peeling back layers of editing to find the authentic kernel beneath later additions. Valuable work. But it left a significant gap. Historical criticism couldn't explain why communities preserved texts that contradicted their core theology. It couldn't account for how the same text served different communities across centuries. The method excelled at uncovering origins, but had nothing to say about what happened next. Enter canonical criticism. This method shifted attention from origins to reception. Its core assumption: biblical texts were generated, transmitted, reworked, and preserved within communities for whom they were authoritative. The final received form, not some hypothetical earlier version, is what matters most. This doesn't reject historical inquiry, it adds a complementary lens. The method asks 5 key questions. First, what meaning did the writer seek in the text's final form? Second, what did the writer's own community find? Third, what would later communities find when the text became canonical? Fourth, how did communities re-signify earlier tradition, give it new meaning for new circumstances? Fifth, why did communities accept certain texts as canonical rather than setting them aside? That fifth question changes everything. Preservation itself is meaningful data. The act of keeping a text is an interpretive act. Now let's put this method to work. To do that, we travel to the worst day in ancient Israel's history. In 587 or 586 BCE, scholars differ on the exact year. The Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, ended the Davidic monarchy, and forced much of the population into exile. This was not merely a military defeat, it was a theological catastrophe. The Torah promised that faithfulness to God would bring blessing and security. The prophets declared that God controlled history and would protect Israel. Now the temple was rubble, the king was gone, and the people were captive in a foreign land. Every foundational theological claim lay in ruins alongside the city walls. Into this devastation, the writings spoke. Canonical criticism asks how the post-exilic community used these books, whatever their original composition circumstances. The answer reveals a striking pattern. The Ketuvim contains voices that both challenge and affirm the theology of Torah and prophets. Job questions whether the righteous truly prosper. Ecclesiastes doubts whether human effort has lasting meaning. Lamentations gives raw voice to communal grief. Esther never mentions God at all. Yet alongside these, Psalms express trust in God's faithfulness. Proverbs affirms that wisdom leads to good life. Chronicles retells Israel's history with hope. The community preserved both voices, questioning and affirming side by side. They didn't resolve the tension, they canonized it. Canonical criticism reveals that Scripture is not a static artifact. It's a living process of communities finding meaning across time. The Ketuvim exists in the canon because a traumatized community needed texts that could hold pain, doubt, and the search for meaning alongside inherited faith. This changes how we read any canonical text. The question shifts from what did the author intend to what did it mean to those who refuse to let it disappear. When you encounter a text that contradicts everything around it, in scripture, in law, in any tradition, ask the canonical critics question, why was this preserved? Right? The answer tells you more about the community than the text ever could.